Allman in the Morning. Common Sense Radio.
Good morning, you bunch of drunks.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. If you're listening and you're angry, keep listening. And if you're happy and having a great morning this morning, well, good morning to you. Stacy Washington, I'm in for Jamie Allman, who is on a cross-country trek to the inauguration with his son, Aiden. And their fun pictures are up at 971talk.com/Allman. Get over there and take a look. Tweet Jamie at @JAllman971. That's his Twitter handle. And you can tweet him and tell him what you think about his trip and the pictures and everything. And he'd really enjoy that. He's already retweeted me, so I know he's up and at 'em. They're already having fun. Let's get back to our guest, which is Mark Meckler. He is at Mark Meckler on Twitter. His website is conventionofstates.com. Mark, thanks for holding over the break.
Oh, no problem. Glad to be with you this morning.
I am too. I've been split. I was talking about this in the first hour of the show that I first was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. And then Phyllis Schlafly came out against the Convention of States. And I was like, oh, okay, I feel like I'm against it. And then I was at Leadership Council of the Rockies February of last year, and the keynote speaker for the first night's dinner was none other than Mark Levin. I got to meet him afterwards, and he talked about this, his book, The Convention of States. And so then I was kind of like, well, I mean, Mark Levin really kicked it out of the park. And so now it's been the election, and I've been so off of even paying attention to it. So it's fantastic to have you on and walk through this. I'm sure there are a lot of listeners who would really like to know what this is all about. So first, let's discuss the problem. And you kind of delved into it a little bit, but could you quickly recap the four major abuses perpetrated by the federal government?
Well, sure. And the way the resolution lays out, so this is a resolution that has to be passed in 34 states to get us in convention. And as we went around the country, and I've been traveling around the country for 8 years, working with grassroots activists, there are three main areas that I hear grassroots activists talk about. One, everybody is disgusted with the federal spending and the way the federal government spends and wastes money and, spends more than they have. And so the first area in the resolution calls for placing fiscal restraints on the federal government. That would include things like a balanced budget amendment. How about forcing the federal government to follow generally accepted accounting principles? They use fantasy accounting principles. So there's things like that, tying spending to GDP plus, inflationary measures or to population plus inflation. There's all kinds of ways we can throttle down the spending of the federal government. So that's the first area. The second area is placing scope or jurisdictional restraints on the federal government. And what I mean by that, just in layman's terms, is people think the federal government does too much. And in fact, the federal government has far exceeded the enumerated powers in the Constitution. So our job is to stuff it back in the constitutional box, make sure they're only doing those base things that they were expected to do when the country was founded, send the rest of it back to the people in the states. So that's the second area. And then the third area is term limits. Generally, the American people, 80% of them say that Congress should be term limited. You can also term limit, I think this is important, federal judges, especially the Supreme Court. You could term limit federal bureaucrats, too. How's that sound?
A lot of things you said sound very, very, very good. Okay, so... Wow, you just unpacked a real, that's not like a teensy little bit of information you just shared. So one of the questions that kind of, it's a nagging thought, is that you open up this Convention of States, and it's like Pandora's box. Then you have people stuffing in, different special interest group rights and things like that. How do you prevent it from kind of spiraling out of control and becoming, a free-for-all for people who don't believe the things that we believe about limited government and the Constitution?
Sure. Well, so there's all kinds of protections, procedural protections along the way, but let's start with the end, because that's where I think the founders exhibited the most caution. It takes 3/4 of the states, or 38 states in our case, to ratify anything that were to come out of convention. It's important for people to understand that when the states get together in convention, all they're doing is holding a meeting to have a discussion and make suggestions. I call it a suggesting convention. And whatever comes out of there has to be ratified by both houses of the legislature in 38 states. Today we have 33 states with both houses controlled by Republicans. We're at a high water mark for Republicans and conservatives in the United States of America at the state level. So if we are going to restrain the federal government anytime safely, now is the time. Flipping that math on its head is important. It takes only 13 states to stop anything you and I wouldn't like. So if something, I don't believe it can, but if something were to come out of the convention we didn't like, it takes only one legislative house in each of 13 states to stop it. I'm talking the 13 most conservative states in America.
Well, that is the truth. I mean, one of the things that has happened over the past two midterm elections is that politically speaking, in the legislatures across the country, the Republicans have really just it's been a massacre for the Democrats. Over 1,000 seats lost, which means a lot of the smaller budget things that you're talking about, the term limits, all of that. This is already there's already a movement for that type of thought and that type of legislative direction going on. So let's talk about the strategy. You say that two goals separate your plan from all of the other Article V organizations.
Well, yeah, I mean, the first thing is that this is a grassroots movement, and this is actually the most important thing to me. I'm just a grassroots guy. I got involved in politics 8 years ago, starting with the Tea Party. Never intended to be in politics. I'm not a politician. I'm not running for office. And that's who we represent. Across the country now, over 2.1 million patriots are involved in this movement. They are literally in every single state legislative district in the country. And so to me, that's the most important thing, is that this is a movement of the people, by the people, and for the people. That's who's in charge. That's who's driving this thing in every state. That's why I traveled to 40 states in the last 2 years to meet with all those people. So I think that's the most important. The second is this Article 5 effort involves an attempt to literally throttle down the federal government. All the others are piecemeal. They're one little piece here or there. I don't think they're going to be effective at controlling the government, and they certainly don't have the grassroots support that is required to get to a convention. It takes an army of people fighting for this to get to a convention.
So how do we, as Missourians and people who might be interested in helping out with this, I know you're having an event that's coming up. Is it tonight?
That's tonight. That's in Kirkwood at 123 West Jefferson. Starts at 6 o'clock with just a social hour. People will be milling around and eating. And at 7 p.m., we're going to have a roundtable discussion and a Q&A session. Again, that's at PJ's Tavern in Kirkwood. And the way folks get involved is they can go to conventionofstates.com. They can read all about the project. They can get signed up to help. I recommend they get involved and become what's called a district captain for their district here in Missouri. They can call the legislature and talk to their own representative or their own senator. We're really blessed. We have Senator Kehoe in the Senate sponsoring. We have Senator Frederick in the House sponsoring. We've got a lot of momentum. We've built a lot of relationships there over the last couple of years. We're going to get it done in Missouri this year.
I love it. And I want to help out people who are thinking, well, what are some of the things you want to accomplish? I know you've been over a few of these, but I want to name these off because these are some of my favorite pet peeves with federal government. A limitation on using executive orders and federal regulations to enact law, since Congress is supposed to be the exclusive agency to enact law. Imposing term limits on Congress and the Supreme Court. Placing an upper limit on federal taxation. Bing, 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 1,000 times yes. And requiring the sunset on all existing federal taxes and a supermajority vote to replace them with new, fairer taxes. Those things alone are enough to get people interested. You just shared the information about your event, and I would love it if you would please put that information on your Twitter feed. I'm going to give everyone the Twitter feed right now. It's at Mark Meckler, MarkMeckler, Mark Meckler. That's the Twitter account. The website is conventionofstates.com. Good luck with the event tonight, and thank you so much for coming on Almond in the Morning.
Always great to talk to you, Stacy. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark.